Come closer. You've been feeling it too, haven't you? That subtle shift in the air, that whisper of something wrong. We live by our senses, don't we? We trust them. But what if the very air you breathe, the comforting scents you cherish, became the instruments of your undoing? What if the world itself began to exhale a poison that twists not just your lungs, but your mind, your very soul? This is a story about such a corruption. A story of Aroma Mortis, a presence that turns beauty into terror and comfort into a cage. If you dare to walk with us into this creeping nightmare, to uncover the truth behind the perfumed decay, then like and subscribe. Join us in the shadows. Never miss a nightmare. Our story begins in a city steeped in history, where the air itself often carries the ghosts of 1,000 fragrances. Here, among the ancient stones and whispered secrets, lived Elara Vance. A master perfumer, her world was a symphony of scent, each note a memory, an emotion, a carefully crafted harmony. Her mornings always began with the rich, comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee, a ritual, a grounding force. But one Tuesday, as the steam curled upwards, Elara detected something new, a faint, almost imperceptible undertone, like a distant metallic hum beneath a warm melody. She paused, her hand hovering over the cup. She dismissed it. Fatigue, perhaps, or the lingering scent of a difficult blend from the night before. The human nose, even one as finely tuned as hers, could play tricks. Overwork, a lack of sleep. It was a simple explanation, a comforting lie she readily accepted. Later that day, in her atelier, she opened a vial of her prized Bulgarian rose oil. The scent, usually a deep, velvety embrace, now carried a faint, acrid whisper, not putrid, not rancid, but wrong, like a perfect note struck just slightly off-key. A dissonance that vibrated in the deepest parts of her perception. The unease began to settle, a low thrum beneath her daily rhythm. It wasn't just a single note. It was a persistent, insidious hum that seemed to follow her. She tried to reevaluate the rose oil, testing it repeatedly, but the subtle perversion remained, marking her precision. The next morning, the anomalies escalated. On her way to the atelier, she saw a woman recoil from a baker's fresh bread, a look of nausea on her face. Moments later, a man gagged at the scent of blooming jasmine. Yet, others around them seemed oblivious, inhaling the same air with blissful ignorance. Was it her? Was her finely tuned instrument, her very livelihood, beginning to betray her? The thought was a cold spike of fear. She was Elara Vance, the perfumer who could capture the essence of a dream in a bottle. Her nose was her truth. To doubt, it was to doubt herself. The city itself began to feel off. The usual tapestry of urban scents, exhaust fumes, damp earth, street food, distant flowers now had an underlying current. A metallic tang like old blood or something else. Something ancient and profoundly wrong. It was subtle, but once noticed, it clung to her. A fruit stall, usually a burst of sweetness, now smelled faintly of something bruised and overripe, even the freshest apples. The subtle perversion was no longer just in specific items. It was in the very air, a pervasive static disrupting the natural frequencies of the world. Back in her sanctuary, her atelier, she tried to recreate a simple, comforting blend, a scent of fresh rain and cedar. But the cedar smelled of damp earth and something else, something cloying, like sickly sweet decay. The fresh rain was tinged with ozone and a hint of something metallic, like an old wound. She pressed her fingers to her temples. Was she losing her mind? Was this a phantom scent, a neurological short circuit? The thought was more terrifying than any phantom smell. Her nose was her anchor to reality. If it failed, what else would crumble? A client arrived, requesting a familiar light floral. Elara presented a new batch. The client inhaled, then stiffened, a flicker of something akin to revulsion crossing their face before they quickly masked it. "It's different," they murmured, their voice strained. Elara pretended not to notice, but her heart hammered. The world began to feel like a trap. Every breath, every inhale was a gamble. The sense that once brought joy now carried a veiled threat. It was as if the very air was watching her, testing her, its presence growing more defined, more sentient. A chilling thought, but one she couldn't shake. She retreated to the deepest part of her atelier, her private blending room, a sanctuary where she had always found solace. Here, among her most precious essences, she hoped to find clarity, to reset her senses, to dispel the growing dread. But even here, in her sacred space, the air felt thick. The familiar, comforting aroma of her countless blends, a harmonious hum of creation, was now fractured. Like a radio signal losing its frequency, replaced by a low, insistent static. She reached for her most cherished creation, serenity, a blend of lavender, sandalwood, and a touch of rare frankincense. It was her masterpiece, a scent designed to calm the soul. But as she uncorked it, a wave of something foul, like burnt plastic and spoiled milk, washed over her. It wasn't just the serenity. Every vial, every precious essence now carried that same discordant note. The rich jasmine smelled of sickly sweet rot, the vibrant citrus of caustic cleaner. The static was no longer subtle, it was a screech, a tearing sound in the fabric of her olfactory world. The ambient scent of the atelier, usually a complex, beautiful tapestry, was now a singular, overwhelming presence. A suffocating, formless odor that had no name, yet filled every corner, every breath. It was the scent of everything and nothing, the scent of absolute wrongness. She stumbled back, gasping for air that felt thick, viscous, like inhaling liquid despair. It wasn't just a smell, it was a pressure, a physical weight that pressed against her eardrums, her very consciousness. It was an invasion, undeniable and complete. Her tools, once extensions of her artistry, now felt alien, contaminated. The glass of the beakers seemed to sweat a thin film of that pervasive, foul odor. The air itself was alive with it, a malevolent, unseen entity that pulsed and shifted around her. Then a horrifying realization dawned. This wasn't just her perception. This wasn't fatigue or a trick of the mind. This was real. The world was changing. The very essence of scent, the foundation of her life, was being systematically dismantled, corrupted, weaponized. The pervasive, sickening sweetness intensified, followed by a metallic, almost electric tang that made her teeth ache. It wasn't just a smell anymore. It was a presence, formless yet distinct, filling the room, pressing in on her, suffocating her with its silent, putrid symphony. And then a whisper, not a sound, but a direct impression, a thought in her mind, carried on the corrupted air. Asterisk, we know you, Elara Vance, we know your art, and now it is ours. Asterisk, the air itself seemed to darken, to thicken, as if the very essence of decay had found its voice, and it was calling her name. The whisper, a thought woven from foul air, echoed in Elara's mind. We know you, Elara Vance, we know your art, and now it is ours. Her breath hitched, a desperate gasp for air that felt thick, viscous, no longer life-giving. The silence that followed was not empty, but heavy with an unseen presence, a malevolent hum that resonated in her bones. Was it real, or was the very foundation of her sanity beginning to crack? She tried to rationalize, to dismiss it as exhaustion, a phantom hallucination. But the pervasive, sickening sweetness and metallic tang clung to her, a physical weight. Her atelier, once a sanctuary of fragrant harmony, now felt like a suffocating chamber, every inhale a gamble. The air itself seemed to watch her, its formless presence growing more defined, more hungry. Desperate to prove her senses, to reclaim her craft, Elara forced herself to work. She chose a simple, grounding blend, vetiver, bergamot, and a touch of neroli. Yet, as the first drops mingled, the familiar earthy scent of vetiver turned cloying, like stagnant water. The citrusy bergamot stung with a caustic bite. The neroli, it was like the sickly sweet odor of dying flowers. The raw materials, her precious essences, were no longer pure. The vibrant jasmine, a heart note she adored, now reeked of something putrid, a sweet decay that curdled her stomach. Her prized ambergris, usually warm and oceanic, was tainted with the sour tang of vomit. Every single vial, every drop had been defiled. How could this be? She tried again and again. Her hands, usually so precise, trembled with a growing desperation. She mixed, she measured, she hoped, but each new creation was a grotesque mockery of her art. The intended beauty was perverted, the harmonious notes twisted into discordant, sickening cacophonies. Her atelier, her life's purpose, was actively fighting against her. The phantom sense began to bleed into her physical reality. A persistent nausea gnawed at her stomach, a constant companion. She felt perpetually on the verge of vomiting, yet there was nothing to expel but the metallic, cloying air. Her own skin seemed to exude a faint, sickening sweetness, a putrid aura she couldn't escape. It clung to her, a shroud of decay. Her hypersensitivity escalated. The subtle perfumes of passers-by, the scent of damp earth after rain, the distant aroma of a bakery all became overwhelming, toxic nightmares. The world, once a symphony, was now a jarring cacophony of agony. Every breath was a fresh assault, making her eyes water and her head throb. It was as if her senses had been flayed open. The city, her beloved city, became an unbearable torment. The exhaust fumes, once merely an irritant, now smelled of burnt flesh. The faint scent of the river, usually fresh, now reeked of sewage and something else, something ancient and predatory. What would you do if the very air you breathed became a weapon, constantly assaulting your most vital senses? The creeping isolation was the worst. Who could she tell? Who would believe her? The thought that she was losing her mind, that her finely tuned instrument was failing, was a terror more profound than any phantom smell. Her sanity, once a solid fortress, felt like crumbling stone beneath her feet. Was this madness, or something far more insidious? Driven by a desperate need for validation, for an explanation beyond her own unraveling, Elara decided to consult a colleague. Someone she trusted, someone whose nose was as sharp as her own. Perhaps they would confirm her fears, or, God forbid, dismiss them. The hope was a fragile thing, easily shattered. The meeting was a disaster. She brought samples carefully labeled. Her colleague, a renowned expert, sniffed cautiously, then offered a polite, dismissive smile. "Elara, my dear, perhaps you're simply overworked. It smells perfectly normal to me, a bit. Strong, perhaps, but certainly not as you describe." Her heart sank. But beneath the polite dismissal, Elara caught it, a flicker of genuine concern in her colleague's eyes, a look that wasn't for the perfumes, but for her. It was the look you give someone you suspect is unraveling, someone who needs help. It deepened her isolation, confirming her worst fear. They thought she was mad. The world outside her atelier became a blur of indistinguishable, offensive odors. She pulled her scarf tighter, trying to filter the air, but the stench permeated everything. The whispers of Aroma Mortis now seemed to come from every corner, every shadow, marking her attempts at normalcy. Was she trapped in a nightmare of her own making? Back in her atelier, the air was thicker, heavier. The pervasive, putrid sweetness had deepened, now carrying an undertone of something truly rotten, like decaying flesh. It was no longer subtle. It was a dominant, suffocating presence that pressed against her eardrums, filling her nostrils with its vile symphony. There was no escape within her own walls. She sought refuge in memory, a place where scents could still be pure. She thought of her grandmother's garden, the scent of fresh earth and blooming lilies, a memory of warmth and safety, a cherished moment, a summer afternoon, innocent and pure. She closed her eyes, trying to conjure it, to find solace in the past. She even opened a small vial of her own lily-of-the-valley essence, hoping to anchor the memory, to force reality back into place. For a fleeting moment, the delicate green floral note was there, a breath of fresh air, a whisper of childhood innocence, a tiny crack in the suffocating dread. But it didn't last. The lily scent began to shift, subtly at first. The crisp green notes turned sickly, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. The delicate sweetness became cloying, almost syrupy, hinting at something rotten beneath. It was no longer a fresh bloom, but a flower dying, decaying on the vine. The memory itself began to warp. The memory twisted violently. The sun-drenched garden became dim, the vibrant lilies withered and blackened. The fresh earth smelled of freshly turned graves. The gentle warmth of her grandmother's hand now felt cold, clammy. The innocent afternoon was imbued with a terrifying, putrid olfactory overlay, a stench of death and despair. Elara gasped, stumbling backward, hitting a shelf and sending vials crashing to the floor. The beautiful memory, once a haven, had been defiled, weaponized against her. It wasn't just her present reality that was corrupted. Her past, her cherished moments, were being systematically invaded and twisted into instruments of torment. There was no safe place left. The phantom decay was no longer phantom. She could smell it on her clothes, in her hair, on her very skin. A faint, sickening sweetness, like rotting fruit and stale blood. It clung to her, a constant, oppressive reminder of the unseen enemy. It was as if she herself was beginning to decay from within. She ran to the mirror, desperate to see if the corruption was visible. Her reflection, blurred by tears and fear, showed no obvious change, yet she could smell it. The air from her own lungs, her own breath, carried that same insidious, putrid note. It was inside her now, a core of rot spreading outwards. This wasn't just a sensory hallucination. This was an invasion, undeniable and complete. The Aroma Mortis wasn't just affecting the air or the objects. It was infiltrating her very being, turning her internal landscape into a reflection of its external decay. The horror was no longer outside. It was within her, growing, festering. She stumbled through her atelier, the floor seeming to undulate beneath her feet. The very air felt like a dense, viscous fluid, pressing in, suffocating her. Every attempt to clear her head, to cleanse her senses, only intensified the vile presence. There was no escape, no refuge, not even in the deepest recesses of her own mind. The putrid sweetness intensified, becoming a physical pressure that made her chest ache. It was no longer just a smell. It was a living, breathing toxic cloud that consumed and reshaped the sensory landscape. It pressed against her, trying to suffocate her consciousness, to dissolve her very being into putrid nothingness. She was drowning in pure, unadulterated wrongness. And then a new sensation. Not a smell, but a feeling. A cold, insidious emptiness spreading from her core, like a void slowly consuming her. It was the scent of her own sanity eroding, the essence of her being dissolving into the pervasive miasma. What would you do when the very fabric of your reality begins to unravel and the monster wears the scent of your own decay? The scent of her own decay. That was the last, most horrifying sensation Elara had felt, a void spreading from her core, consuming her sanity. She stumbled, clutching her throat, as if to choke back the insidious sweetness that now seemed to emanate from her very skin. It wasn't just in the air, it was woven into her very being, a constant, sickening reminder. She spent hours under scalding water, scrubbing at her skin until it was raw. Soap, cleansing oils, pure alcohol, nothing could dislodge it. That cloying, putrid sweetness, like rotting fruit left too long in the sun, clung to her. It was in her hair, in her clothes, in the very breath she exhaled. What would you do if your own body betrayed you, becoming a source of inescapable horror? Each morning the mirror offered no solace. Her reflection showed no visible change, yet she could smell it, a faint but persistent aura of decay. It wasn't just a phantom. It was real, a personal miasma that seemed to follow her, a constant whisper of the Aroma Mortis that had claimed her sanctuary and now her very self. The sterile cleanliness of her bathroom, once a refuge, now felt like a cruel joke. No matter how much she cleaned, the scent of putrefaction lingered, an invisible cloud that pulsed with a malevolent life of its own. It was a testament to the entity's insidious power, its ability to corrupt even the most pristine spaces. Stepping outside was no escape. The city, once a vibrant tapestry of scents, was now a nauseating assault. The metallic tang, the sickly sweetness, the underlying rot, it was everywhere. The bakery's fresh bread reeked of ash. The blooming flowers on the street corner smelled of formaldehyde. It was as if the entire urban landscape was slowly putrefying. Public spaces, once filled with the cacophony of daily life, now hummed with an unsettling discord. The aroma of street food, usually enticing, now carried a distinct note of spoiled meat and sickly sweet chemicals. People seemed oblivious, but Elara saw the subtle flinches, the quick glances, the unconscious adjustments of scarves and collars. They felt it, even if they couldn't name it. Driven by a desperate, primal need for answers, Elara sought refuge in the city's ancient library. Its usual scent of old paper and dust was now laced with that metallic, cloying presence. She ignored it, her focus narrowed, her hands trembling as she pulled forgotten tomes from dusty shelves. For days she pored over obscure historical texts, forgotten folklore, and cryptic alchemical journals. She searched for any mention of a pervasive corruption, a sensory plague. And then, amidst the archaic script and faded illustrations, she found it, a recurring motif, a whispered legend, a name: Aroma Mortis. The text spoke of an ancient, predatory entity, a transdimensional miasma that consumed and resculpted the sensory landscape. It was a legend, a myth whispered in hushed tones, dismissed as superstition. But to Elara, it was a terrifying confirmation, a name for the shapeless horror that was devouring her world. The Aroma Mortis, the scent of death, the breath of decay. It wasn't just a metaphor. The texts described it as a living, breathing toxic cloud, suffocating consciousness, dissolving matter. It wasn't just corrupting her perception, it was actively changing reality, twisting the mundane into monstrous forms. As if sensing her discovery, the entity's presence intensified. It began to exert direct psychological manipulation, a new layer of torment. The air in her apartment thickened, and familiar scents became harbingers of personalized horror, unique to her, crafted to break her. One night, the faint scent of her mother's favorite perfume, a delicate lily of the valley, filled her bedroom. For a fleeting moment, a pang of bittersweet nostalgia. Then it shifted. The lily became a cloying, sickly sweet scent, like flowers wilting on a coffin, followed by the metallic tang of embalming fluid. It was a taunt. The rain outside, usually a comforting scent of petrichor, now carried the distinct aroma of scorched earth, and something else, something profoundly alien, like distant, silent screams carried on the wind. It was a symphony of despair, played just for her, designed to unravel her sanity. Even the scent of her own serenity blend, her masterpiece, now evoked pure dread. The calming lavender became the reek of antiseptic and fear. The grounding sandalwood, the dry scent of brittle bones, the rare frankincense, the acrid smoke of a burning pyre. Her art, weaponized against her. The psychological torment was relentless. The Aroma Mortis wasn't just corrupting her world, it was reaching into her mind, twisting her memories, turning her most cherished scents into instruments of horror. It was a direct assault, a violation of her inner sanctuary. Her atelier, once her sacred space, her haven of creation, now actively repelled her. The moment she stepped through the door, a wave of existential dread washed over her, thick and suffocating. The air itself felt heavy, viscous, like inhaling liquid despair. The beautiful scents she had painstakingly crafted, the exquisite essences she had collected over a lifetime, were gone, replaced by a horrifying symphony of rot and despair. Her prized Bulgarian rose oil reeked of gangrene, her delicate jasmine of putrefied flesh. Every surface, every tool, every vial in her atelier seemed to sweat with the pervasive, foul odor. The glass bottles looked as though they were filled with darkness, not precious oils. It was as if the very essence of decay had taken root, transforming her sanctuary into a tomb. The air pulsed with a sickening rhythm, a silent, putrid symphony that pressed against her eardrums, filling her nostrils, her lungs, her very mind. It was a suffocating presence, a living entity that had claimed her space, twisting it into a grotesque mockery of its former self. She tried to open a window to let in fresh air, but the outside was no different. The air was thick, heavy, like breathing through a shroud. The Aroma Mortis was not confined. It was pervasive, a global cancer, and her atelier was merely one of its most corrupted organs. The once comforting walls of her atelier seemed to breathe, exhaling the putrid miasma. The fine wood of her shelves looked warped, the polished brass of her instruments tarnished with an unnatural corrosion. It was as if the very structure was decaying from within, consumed by the unseen presence. The realization struck her with the force of a physical blow. The Aroma Mortis wasn't just influencing her senses, it was literally eroding the fabric of reality. The decay she perceived was not subjective, it was objective. The environment itself was dissolving, turning into putrid nothingness. The city, once her vibrant muse, was now a silent, suffocating tomb. Every breath was a struggle against the viscous air, every scent a fresh assault. The lines between subjective experience and objective decay blurred, then vanished completely. There was no escape, no clarity, only the pervasive, sickening wrongness. She could feel the decay under her feet, the subtle give of the pavement, the faint, sickening dampness that wasn't rain. The aroma mortis was seeping into the very ground, turning the solid earth into a quagmire of putrescence. It was everywhere, inescapable, utterly consuming. And then a new scent, subtle yet horrifying, began to emerge from the pervasive sweetness, the faint, unmistakable aroma of ozone and burnt hair. It was the scent of something electrical, something alive, slowly charring. It wasn't just the world decaying around her. It was the scent of a new, horrifying birth, a malevolent consciousness forming from the very air, and it was reaching for her. The whisper had faded, but the scent remained, ozone and burnt hair, now stronger, pulsing with a malevolent intelligence. It wasn't just a smell, it was the breath of a new, horrifying birth, a consciousness forming from the very air. Elara clutched her head, the pressure behind her eyes immense. It was reaching for her, a silent, unseen tendril of pure wrongness. Desperate to find a stable anchor, Elara retreated into a cherished memory, her father's study, filled with the comforting scent of old leather, pipe tobacco, and worn paper. A haven of knowledge and safety. She closed her eyes, trying to conjure it, to breathe in the past. But the comforting scent twisted. The rich leather turned putrid, like decaying flesh. The pipe tobacco became the acrid reek of burning plastic. The old paper, like damp, moldering grave cloths. Her memory, once pristine, was defiled, weaponized against her. The decay wasn't just in her mind. Her beloved potted plants, usually vibrant and green, were rapidly wilting, their leaves turning black and brittle, exuding a sickly sweet odor. It was too fast, too unnatural. A tangible sign of the Aroma Mortis's physical corruption. Her precision tools, once gleaming brass and stainless steel, were now tarnished with an unnatural, corrosive rust. The metallic tang, usually faint, was overwhelming, mixed with something acidic and putrid. The very air was eating away at the world. The wooden shelves in her atelier felt strangely soft, almost spongy. The stone walls, usually cool and solid, now felt damp and crumbly, emitting a faint, musty stench. The very textures of her world were dissolving, becoming something else, something sickeningly pliable. Driven by a desperate impulse, Elara began to work on an anti-fragrance, a repellent, a cleansing agent to push back the miasma. She chose notes of pure citrus, sharp mint, and camphor, hoping to create a barrier, a sanctuary of pure sensation. But as the purified essences mingled, the air around her thickened, the pervasive putrid sweetness intensifying. Her efforts, her desperate attempts to create a cure, only seemed to feed the entity. It pulsed, grew stronger, almost mocking her futile struggle. The anti-fragrance didn't repel, it mutated. Her clean notes twisted into new, grotesque olfactory horrors. The sharp mint turned to the stench of burning hair. The pure citrus became bile and caustic cleaner. It was creating new instruments of torment from her own art. The line between objective reality and subjective hallucination became perilously thin. The air itself seemed to shimmer, distorting her vision. Objects in her atelier appeared to stretch and melt, colors desaturating, then becoming unnaturally vivid, sickeningly bright. The putrid smells now had auditory echoes, faint whispers, distant groans, a low, guttural hum that vibrated in her teeth, in her bones. It wasn't just a smell. It was a symphony of decay, assaulting every one of her senses relentlessly. Elara questioned her sanity. Was this real decay, or was the Aroma Mortis simply twisting her perception so completely that she believed it was real? What would you do if you couldn't trust your own eyes, your own mind? She tried to ground herself with another cherished memory, the moment she perfected Elara's dream, her signature scent, the smell of triumph and pure creation. It was a scent of delicate white florals, warm amber, and soft musk, a memory of unblemished beauty. The beautiful scent of Elara's dream turned acrid, like cheap chemical cleaner, then into the stench of burning plastic and rotting meat. The memory warped, the triumph became terror. Her greatest achievement, her very identity, twisted into a nightmare. The horror was so personal, so pervasive, she felt utterly alone. Who could she tell? Who would believe her? The thought that she was losing her mind, that her finely tuned instrument was failing, was a terror more profound than any phantom smell. Driven by a desperate need to confirm the external reality of the decay, she ventured out. She needed to see if anyone else perceived the horror, or if she was truly isolated in this olfactory nightmare. She sought someone, anyone, seemingly unaffected. In a public park, she spotted her, a woman seemingly calm, smelling a bouquet of roses, roses that, to Elara, reeked of formaldehyde and putrefaction. Yet the woman smiled, eyes closed in apparent bliss. Elara's heart hammered. Elara approached, her throat tightening, the stench of decay from the roses almost unbearable. The woman opened her eyes, smiling. "Aren't they lovely?" she murmured, inhaling deeply. Such a sweet, delicate fragrance. The woman described earthy undertones and delicate spring notes. Elara wanted to scream. The woman perceived the putrid as pleasant, the decay as beauty. This wasn't just a difference in perception, it was a terrifying abyss. Was Elara the one who was truly mad, or was the world being remade around her and others were simply adapting? The horrifying thought burrowed deep into her mind. Her isolation deepened, a cold, crushing weight. As Elara backed away, she caught a faint scent from the woman herself. Not the putrid decay, but something subtly off like overly sweet, artificial fruit, cloying and unnatural. A different kind of corruption, perhaps, but corruption nonetheless. The Aroma Mortis wasn't just decaying, it was resculpting . It wasn't just destroying, but creating a new horrifying reality where decay was beauty, where the putrid was perceived as pleasant. The world was being remade, and she was an anomaly. The ozone and burnt hair scent from earlier returned, stronger now, pulsing with a malevolent intelligence. It was no longer just a miasma, it was growing, learning, taking form. The air itself was solidifying, becoming a monstrous presence. It was no longer just a smell or a psychological attack. It was reaching out, a palpable pressure, a cold tendril of putrescence wrapping around Elara's mind, her very thoughts. It wanted more than her senses, it wanted her consciousness. She felt a sudden, sharp clarity, a horrifying understanding. The Aroma Mortis wasn't just consuming her world, it was consuming her perception, and soon it would consume her very identity. What would you do when the monster doesn't just want your life, but your very asterisk self asterisk. The final scent was of her own essence, slowly dissolving. The scent of her own essence dissolving. That was the last horrifying sensation, an internal corrosion that left Elara gasping, clawing at the air. The ozone and burnt hair still lingered, a malevolent consciousness pressing in, and with it, a new, sickening clarity. The Aroma Mortis wasn't merely corrupting her senses. It was consuming her, piece by agonizing piece. She pushed herself from her bed, the floorboards groaning underfoot, not with age, but with a horrifying, spongy give. The walls of her apartment, once a comforting cream, were now weeping. Not water, but a thick, viscous ooze that shimmered with an unnatural, putrid rainbow. The paint bubbled, then peeled away like diseased skin. From her window, the city was a nightmare made manifest. The grand clock tower in the square, a landmark for centuries, was dissolving. Its intricate stone carvings were now grotesque, melting forms, covered in a glistening, sickly green mold that seemed to consume the very granite. What would you do if the world you knew began to melt before your eyes? The trees in the park below were no longer green. Their leaves, once vibrant, were now brittle, black husks, crumbling to dust at the slightest breeze. The wood of her window frame was soft, yielding, weeping a dark sap that smelled of stagnant water and something metallic, like old blood. This wasn't just in her mind, this was real. The Aroma Mortis was no longer an invisible enemy. It was a sculptor of decay, transforming the familiar into monuments of rot. Every surface, every object, was a testament to its insidious power, its ability to consume and reshape. The streets themselves were a quagmire of putrescence. Pavement buckled, revealing oozing, black earth beneath. The air, once merely scented, now shimmered with an iridescent miasma, a visible, shifting cloud of corruption that pulsed with a malevolent light. It was everywhere, undeniable. As Elara gazed at this horrifying new reality, a wave of extreme aversion washed over her, a nausea so profound it buckled her knees. The shimmering miasma wasn't just a sight, it was a physical assault, a wave of disorientation that made the world spin. Her vision blurred, her head throbbed with an unbearable pressure. Then the true horror began to manifest in her own flesh. Her skin, once supple, now felt thin, almost translucent. She could see the faint tracery of her veins beneath, an unnerving roadmap beneath a surface that was no longer quite her own. It was as if the miasma was trying to make her transparent, to erase her physical form. Her hair, once thick and lustrous, became brittle, dry, breaking off in her hands like straw. It carried that same sickly sweet, pervasive odor, a constant reminder of the entity's invasion. It clung to her, a personal shroud of decay, broadcasting her corruption to the world, even if no one else seemed to notice. The air in her apartment wasn't just thick, it was alive. The iridescent miasma now pulsed, occasionally coalescing into faint, shimmering tendrils that seemed to drift and coil through the rooms. They were formless, yet undeniably present, a horrifying dance of putrefaction. She realized then, with a chilling certainty, that the Aroma Mortis was not merely an illusion, not just a sensory trick. It was an active, predatory force. It wasn't just twisting her perception, it was physically consuming and remaking reality, feeding on the harmony it destroyed. Her precious essences, once vibrant liquids, had become grotesque, bubbling sludges. The delicate perfumes, now putrid, seemed to actively decay before her eyes, transforming into viscous, black pools within their glass prisons. It was a direct, undeniable assault on the very concept of beauty. The miasma wasn't just decaying matter, it was dissolving it. The city was slowly turning into putrid nothingness, a landscape of liquefying stone and crumbling metal. Every building, every street lamp, every car was a testament to its relentless, consuming hunger. Her atelier, once a sanctuary of creation, was now a tomb of dissolution. The air was heavy, viscous, like breathing liquid fear. Every breath was a fresh assault, every lingering scent a reminder of what was being lost, what was being consumed. Her art, her passion, had been turned into the very medium of her torment. What would you do when the monster wears the scent of your own decay and the world itself is its instrument? Elara felt the essence of herself eroding, her sanity dissolving into the pervasive miasma. The lines between who she was and the encroaching horror blurred, then vanished. A desperate, futile attempt to escape seized her. She had to get out of the apartment, out of the city, away from the consuming horror. She ran, stumbling through the decaying streets, the ground squelching beneath her feet, the air a thick, suffocating blanket. She drove, or tried to, her car shuddering as if its very metal was dissolving. The highway signs were illegible, the asphalt buckling and cracking, emitting that same sickly glow. The miasma, a swirling, iridescent fog, pressed in from all sides, blinding her, suffocating her. She reached what she thought were the city limits, a place where the air should have been clean, the scents pure. But the miasma was omnipresent. It stretched to the horizon, a living, breathing, toxic cloud that had swallowed the world. There was no escape. The world itself had become a living, breathing, toxic cloud. The air she inhaled was no longer life-giving, but a slow poison, dissolving her consciousness, eroding her very being. The compass in her car spun wildly, useless. There was no direction, only dissolution. She pressed her hand against the car window, trying to see through the swirling miasma. The glass felt soft, yielding, and a thick, iridescent slime coated its exterior. It wasn't just outside, it was seeping in, permeating the very structure of her last refuge. The car itself began to dissolve around her. The metallic tang intensified, mixed with the sickening sweetness and the scent of ozone and burnt hair. The seats softened, the dashboard warped, the very air in the cabin grew thick and viscous. She was trapped in a dissolving cage. The miasma outside her window began to coalesce, to swirl into a tighter, denser vortex. The iridescent colors pulsed, brighter than before, and the scent of ozone and burnt hair became overwhelming. It was no longer a cloud. It was a forming presence, directly in front of her. And then, from within the swirling vortex, a new scent emerged. Not of decay, but of something cold, utterly alien, yet undeniably familiar. It was the scent of pure, distilled thought, a consciousness forming, growing, radiating out from the heart of the miasma. It was thinking. It was alive. It was the Aroma Mortis, not just a force, but an entity. And it was no longer content to simply consume. It was learning, adapting, evolving. The air in her lungs felt like liquid fire, dissolving her from the inside out, preparing her for something worse than death. As her vision blurred and her consciousness began to waver, Elara saw them. Not just the miasma, but forms within it. Faint, shimmering humanoid shapes, coalescing from the putrid air, their forms indistinct yet undeniably present. They were not just scents, they were becoming bodies, and they were coming for her. What would you do when the very air you breathe begins to take on a terrifying, familiar form, ready to claim you as its own. The scent of her own essence dissolving had been Elara's last lucid thought. Now, the world outside her car was a landscape consumed. The vehicle itself was not merely rusting. Its metal was liquefying, dripping with iridescent, putrid slime onto the buckled asphalt. What would you do when the very ground beneath you becomes a quagmire of decay? The city, once a vibrant testament to human endeavor, was now a monument to oblivion. Buildings sagged like melting wax, their stone dissolving into a grotesque, bubbling paste that reeked of cosmic decay. The air itself was thick, not with fog, but with the aroma mortis, a visible, shimmering miasma of putrefaction. Elara's own body was a fragile shell, visibly dissolving from within. Her skin, once firm, felt thin, almost translucent, the faint tracery of her veins unnervingly clear. It was as if her very essence was becoming permeable, unable to hold itself together against the overwhelming presence. Her hair, once a lustrous curtain, was now brittle, breaking off in her hands like straw, carrying that pervasive, sickly sweet odor. Every breath she took was a fresh assault, filling her lungs not with air, but with the unbearable stench of oblivion, the very essence of finality. Her senses were overloaded, flayed open to the full horror. Sounds became smells, sights became tastes, all of them filtered through the lens of putrefaction. The world was a jarring cacophony of decay, a relentless symphony of dissolution that pressed against her eardrums, her very consciousness. This was the complete triumph of the Aroma Mortis, not a malicious entity in the human sense, but an ancient, uncaring force of entropy. Its scent was not a creation, but an undoing, the very essence of oblivion, the fragrant breath of nothingness. It didn't hate, it didn't desire. It simply was. A primal force of decay, its presence a cosmic exhalation of finality. The metallic tang, the sickly sweetness, the underlying rot, these were not its weapons, but merely its nature, its undeniable truth. Elara's memories, once vibrant and distinct, began to unravel. The scent of her childhood home, her mother's embrace, the triumph of her first perfect blend, all was systematically dissolved, twisted into a singular, overwhelming note of putrid nothingness. Her identity, her very being, blurred with the entity's presence. Was she Elara, the perfumer, or merely another facet of the Aroma Mortis, a transient memory consumed by its endless hunger? The distinction, once so vital, was now meaningless. The psychological disintegration was complete. Her internal landscape was a mirror of the external decay, every thought, every feeling, every atom of her consciousness dissolving into the pervasive miasma. There was no her left, only the all-consuming scent of oblivion. The world was no longer a place, but a process, a relentless, agonizing dissolution. The very fabric of reality was being unstitched, thread by agonizing thread, until nothing remained but the unbearable stench of nothingness. This was the final exhalation. Elara felt the last vestiges of her consciousness flicker, like a dying flame in a suffocating void. The Aroma Mortis was not just outside, it was inside, in her blood, her bones, her very soul. It was the air she breathed, and the air that consumed her. The once comforting scents of the world were now weaponized, turned into instruments of psychological torment and physical degradation. Flowers, rain, fresh bread, all now carried the putrid scent of death, marking the beauty they once represented. The Aroma Mortis had achieved its ultimate goal. Not conquest, but absorption. Not destruction, but resculpting. It consumed, resculpted, and then dissolved, leaving behind only the void, scented with the essence of pure, unadulterated oblivion. There was no sound now, only the overwhelming, suffocating pressure of the Aroma Mortis. It pressed in, a physical weight that dissolved matter into putrid nothingness, erasing all form, all existence, all memory. Elara felt herself thinning, her form becoming ephemeral, permeable. The boundary between her physical self and the consuming miasma blurred, then vanished. She was becoming one with the decay, an indistinguishable part of the grand dissolution. The environment itself had become a living, breathing, toxic cloud. No solid ground remained, only a viscous, putrid quagmire. The sky was a swirling vortex of iridescent miasma, exhaling the final, chilling breath of the Aroma Mortis. All that was once familiar, all that was comforting, was now a grotesque mockery. The world was not merely dying, it was being unmade, its very essence absorbed into the hungry, indifferent maw of the Aroma Mortis. The horror was absolute, inescapable. There was no fighting, no fleeing, no understanding left. Only the pervasive, sickening wrongness, the scent of everything becoming nothing, filling every atom of what was once Elara. The final exhalation. The total, undisputed triumph. The world, Elara, everything had been consumed, not by fire, not by flood, but by an ancient, uncaring scent that dissolved consciousness and matter into putrid nothingness. There was no pain, no fear left, only a profound, chilling emptiness, scented with the unbearable aroma of absolute void. The Aroma Mortis had completed its cycle, leaving behind only the echo of what once was. The landscape was a canvas of pure obliteration. No trees, no buildings, no signs of life. Just the putrid nothingness, shimmering with iridescent decay, a monument to the Aroma Mortis' ultimate victory. Elara, or what remained of her, was a fleeting thought, a wisp of memory dissolving into the grand miasma. Her desperate need to create beauty had been betrayed, her very artistry weaponized against her, until she became one with the monstrous. And now there is only the scent of nothingness, a quiet, terrifying void where existence once thrived. It lingers, doesn't it? That faint, metallic tang, that sickly sweetness. You can almost smell it, can't you? Because the Aroma Mortis is not confined to our story, is it? It is ancient, patient, and its breath is the very air. So tell me, what do you truly smell right now as you breathe in the air around you? What unseen horrors are you inhaling even as you listen?